Welcome back to the Boys and Ball podcast. Today we're going to be sitting here with the boys, JT and Young Danny. We're going to be talking about the NFC East division this year.
Well, let's start off with your Giants. What the hell is happening? 4-13 last year. You bring in Brian Dable to be your head coach, and now all of a sudden you guys are good.
I think it's also the addition of Mike Kafka, the OC. I think our new OC has came in and done a great job with the offense, and he's really he's maximizing the skill set of Saquon Barkley very well.
Okay. But still, how does that equate to a roster that was not good enough to really be that close in games? Like, you guys were getting clapped pretty bad last year. You didn't make that many changes to your roster.
Well, yeah, but last year we had our fair share of situations. So, like this year, a lot of the Giants, a lot of our wins are one possession wins. Last year we had a lot of one possession win opportunity games go the other way, and our record looked a little worse than it did. Some days we did just get blown off the field, but we weren't just getting worked every week. We did have some games last year that just went the other way in one-score game situations.
Well, so I have the stats pulled up from last year. So you guys scored the least amount of points in the NFL last year.
Yeah, we did.
You scored 258 points. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's a very slow offense.
No, okay, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. You scored the second least amount of points.
Yes, sir.
To the Jaguars, who scored 253.
The Jaguars, who we beat today?
Barely.
But you were one of two teams last year that scored less than 300 points on the season. What is the turnaround already? Because you guys are, over halfway to what you scored last year, 7 games into the year. So, what changes around? Because Kenny Golladay is still not playing well. You lost your number one receiver.
Kenny Golladay is still not playing.
Well, it's because he's garbage. Well, something happened to that kid from the time he left Detroit because he is bad.
I told you he got hip surgery.
He looks like I'm fairly certain my 97-year-old great grandma could run routes faster than him. If you see that dude in drills, it's awful. He can't move.
A lot of people and other analysts have been saying he hasn't really looked like the same wide receiver since he got the hip surgery in the
offseason. He hasn't really played in 2 years, but that gets me to my point. So you lost Sterling Shepard. Kadarius Toney hasn't had a great year. Saquon Barkley's definitely playing better than last year, but what is the change that you guys can actually move the ball? Because offensive stat-wise, other than a couple big rushing Saquon Barkley games this year, you guys haven't had good stats. Is your defense playing that good to date?
Our defense is playing better, but Daniel Jones is also making a lot smarter football decisions this year.
Okay. So you got less turnovers from Daniel Jones this year?
Yeah, we've got less turnovers coming from Daniel Jones. That Mike Kafka's system that he's putting Daniel Jones in it plays to his skill set. And even though our wide receiver core isn't as good as it was looking on paper with Kadarius Toney and Wan'Dale Robinson and stuff, we have these other guys coming in like Richie James who are being able to do a suitable job for a temporary time being until some of those other big names can come back to our lineup.
Okay.
So I think just staying on the Daniel Jones. Okay, I think another thing is his you're talking about him making smart decisions. His completion percentage is up almost 5 points from where he was last year, and through 11 games last year, he threw what was it? He threw 11 games last year. He threw 7 picks to where he only has 6 this year. 2 this year through 6 games. So, he's making a lot smarter decisions and, obviously keeping the ball. So, that your defense isn't playing, 40 minutes of football every
Yeah,
game.
our defense isn't playing quite out of its mind, but our defense is making those 1 or 2 plays a game that changes the game in your favor.
Yeah.
Our defense is getting that strip sack. Our defense is getting that interception in the middle of the fourth quarter to get us the ball back and get a tempo score. Like our defense is they're not playing super consistent throughout the entire game, but like whenever it comes down to that fourth quarter, Brian Dable just coaches us just a little bit different. He's able to get everybody rallied up to get that last score, to get that one more stop to push our defense over the top or push our offense over the top in late game situations to walk away with the wins.
So let's have this conversation. With the Giants are now 6-1, beat the Jaguars today. You have a little bit, this was, kind of the easier part of the schedule. You got to play some teams like the Panthers, the Jags to get some wins who have been struggling. You beat a couple decent squads, but you haven't played any of the top teams other than the Cowboys who are having a pretty good year so far. We'll see exactly how that pans out with Dak back and that team kind of starting to get into full motion. But you guys have the meat of your schedule coming up here. You still got the Eagles to play twice. You got the Commanders to play twice. I know they're not great, but it's always hard to sweep your division.
Yeah.
You got the Cowboys again. I mean, you got the Seahawks and the Vikings and the Colts. How do the Giants end this year? Is this a playoff team?
See, I think we might be able to scrape by and make like a wild card slot. And like if the Giants can give us loyal Giants fans a wild card playoff berth and just see what happens with just the new regime coming in, with some of the tools they were able to grab in the offseason to try to make a run and put a game plan together and show the New York fans what our offense and defense are going to look like moving forward with the guys that we do have until we can free up more cap room to make bigger decisions for the franchise.
Okay.
I think one of the key things with the Giants is you guys did have a pretty healthy draft this year. With the acquisition of a solid tackle. I know he got hurt this game. Hopefully he's not out very long. I'm not sure. I didn't hear back on the injury report. I knew it was a possible MCL sprain. And then, Kayvon Thibodeau, who's, played pretty good. Not sure about some of your other rookies. Those are your like 2 high-profile rookies. But,
Yeah, Wando Robinson was the other rookie who got in a little bit of the early part of the draft. We got him in the second round. And, I mean, he's been playing – whenever he's on the field, his on-the-field contribution is pretty solid for a rookie, I'd say.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we talked a little bit about the one team that have beat the Giants, the Cowboys. So, they're one of the other teams that you look at and you go, the joke with the NFC East was they were the NFC least. But is this the best division in, the conference, let alone the NFL, with the way these teams are playing? You got the Cowboys who missed Dak. Dak played week 1, and then he just played this week in week 7. So, you had 5 weeks without Dak. They go 4-1 without Dak. They get a win today. The Cowboys are now 5-2. They seem to be getting everyone healthy. They were the top dog in this division. But, they're currently sitting number 3 at 5-2. Do you look at the Cowboys and you think you can beat them the next time, or does that pass rush with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence defeat you?
I think we can split. I think we can split with the Cowboys the second time we play them. I think we'll be able to split the series with the Cowboys.
Okay.
I think we'll split with the Cowboys. I think we'll split with the Eagles, and I think we will sweep the Washington Commanders.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we'll touch too much on the Commanders. That's we're talking about the top teams here. The Commanders have had a very up and down season. They're 3-4 right now. They just beat the struggling Packers. Heineke played this week. There's too many questions about that team. That's not really in contention. Maybe they could play upset on a couple of those wild card teams for the, whoever doesn't win the division. But that's not a team that's really competing right now. I mean, last year the Cowboys went 12-5. This year they're 5-2, but looking at the rest of this Cowboys schedule, they got the Bears next week, then they play the Packers, Vikings, Giants, Colts, Eagles, Titans are kind of the big games to end the year. I don't see that Cowboys team with the way their defense is playing. They have a great pass rush right now. Trayvon Diggs has played very well, way better than could be expected from how bad he looked in preseason and in camp. So I look at this Cowboys team starting to get healthy. I think this is a team that's going to finish above the Giants at the end of the year.
I think the Cowboys definitely do have that kind of potential because, Dak and the Cowboys, they traditionally they'll have a very strong start to the year. But like this year, Dak didn't get them that strong start. So maybe Dak will have a little more juice in the tank a little bit longer to be able to push them to that 10, 11 echelon part of the NFL where they're like, hey, like we are them boys. We can make it back into the playoffs. We can't, that's a hump that Dak needs to overcome. Is that playoff victory?
Yeah, and I mean with the way that defense is playing right now, Micah Parsons playing at defensive player of the year caliber right now. I think this is a team that could get a win in the playoffs. I don't know if they have enough to win the Super Bowl. I don't look at them as a Super Bowl team. I think they have a couple, one too many flaws on that team. Who's going to be the corner opposite side Trayvon Diggs when they go up against some of those teams that have, 2-3 good wide receivers in a solid O-line? Like, if they make it to the Super Bowl and they got to play the Chiefs, are they going to be able to match up across the board and still get pressure? I don't think so. I think the pressure might be there, but I think the corners 2 and 3 are gonna let them down.
I do want to ask you guys a quick question. I know this isn't NFC East related, but do the Cardinals low key have like one of the nastiest receiver corps in the NFL with the addition of Robbie Anderson? D-Hop coming back, Robbie Anderson, and Marquise Brown.
D-Hop had a great first game back, 10 catches, over 100 yards. I just don't know how that all fits. Zach Ertz is a really good tight end for them. He gets a good amount of targets. Unless they turn into the Chiefs and they're throwing the ball that much, I don't know if there's enough ball to go around. The NFL, you're seeing a lot, one of the highest two high safety defense rates since the early 2000s. You got a lot of teams playing the deep ball right now. You're not seeing a lot of big plays. Marquise Brown and Robbie Anderson rely on the big play. So I don't know how effective they can be unless they're catching slants and going crazy.
What do you think, Dan?
I mean, I like the receiving core, but I mean, I feel like Kyler Murray likes to stick it out a little bit more. And then, Benjamin played pretty well this past week for the Cardinals. So, and I feel like, especially in the NFC West, it's kind of hard to be a gunslinging offense. Most of those teams are, a little bit more ground and pound with, a little bit of a West Coast.
Yeah, definitely the West Coast.
They're more like obviously West Coast, but no,
I mean, not like, but if you look at the West Coast offense, short passing, zone runs, that's the epitome of the 49ers.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the most West Coast team you're ever going to see.
Yeah,
and then the Seahawks are more ground and pound this year. They just have some really good receivers to go with it. And I'm not sure about the Rams. The Rams are questionable.
Yeah. But I mean, even the Sean McVay's always kind of he's never really taken big deep shots. It's all get Cooper Kupp to turn around, catch a ball and then try to make it into space. So, they all kind of run some version of the West Coast offense, whether, we got a couple West Coast power run schemes or vertical run scheme into the West Coast offense. So, it's all a version of the West Coast, but which is kind of how the Eagles are playing this year, and I think it's working really well. Is they're playing a little bit more West Coast ball, which is allowing Jalen Hurts to open up into the run, and you got Miles Sanders looking solid.
I mean, I think the biggest things for the Eagles was, which we'll get to the Eagles in a second. So, before we jump to the Eagles, let's finish up with the Cowboys here. How do you guys think they finish out this year? It looks like they've gotten through the meat of their schedule. They played the Bengals, the Bucks, the Rams. They played the Eagles once. They played the Commanders, the Giants once. They kind of have a little bit of an easier schedule. The Bears, Texans, Jaguars to end the year. I mean, do you think this could? I mean, they're 5-2 right now. Do you think this is an 11-win team, or is this a team that could possibly, finish 14-3?
I want to say it's more of like that 10 to 12 win range because they still got to play the Vikings who look solid. They got to play the Giants again, who also are in a little bit of a hot streak. They play the Eagles at the end of the season, and if the Tennessee is fighting for a playoff spot, that last game of the season is going to be rough, especially if Dallas might have a playoff spot locked up. They might not want to start.
Well, they have the Commanders for the last week. Titans the second to last week. But
yeah.
Say I get what you're saying. It's always tough with the Titans, the way they run the football and how big their running back is. They can beat anyone on any given night. You got to really come to play and be the more physical team if you're going to beat the Titans.
And especially if
they're going to be physical.
Especially if they pull Michael Parsons and D-Law, who might not play. Like it's end of the season, like they might be trying to keep them healthy. If they think that they're just going to have a playoff block. So that's why I'm putting them in like that 10-win range.
I mean, I think it's going to be tough for anyone in this division to really sit anyone unless Philly wins out. Just off the fact alone that two of these teams are going to be wild card teams.
Yeah.
So you have to, you have to make sure that you're in a good position, and you definitely don't want to be that 7 seed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my thing is
you
just,
rode the playoff from the 7th seed is egregious.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm just saying is like there's like not a lot of other super strong teams in the NFC, and that's like one of the things we're talking about is it's NFC East being the best conference, the best division in the conference right now, because except for the Vikings, there's not another team, another division that has a team over 5 wins. So
I mean, this division is definitely looking like a division that's going to put 3 teams into the playoff. Now the question is, you have a Philadelphia team that really hasn't been, they made the playoffs last year, but they got shit stomped. There wasn't really a game. The Bucks manhandled them. So they don't really have any playoff experience. The Giants, most of their roster doesn't have playoff experience. And Dallas is, the same thing. They made it to the playoffs. Again, lost in the playoffs. So you gain a little bit of experience in a loss, but you don't learn the, that week to week playoff grind of being, trying to be perfect at every step of the way, and, quickly game planning for, jumping from, and during the regular season, you don't have to jump from game planning for Debo to then immediately game planning for Cooper Kupp. It's pretty rare to have to do that.
Yeah.
And so the playoffs, throws in just that extra factor in there because, you still got to give your guys, the time off, and then you got to get right in. You got to have a great game plan. So you got, Dable's been in coaching situations with Buffalo where they've been in, deep into the playoffs, but it's different when you're the head coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
McCarthy's had his runs, but he hasn't done it with this team. True. And then Sirianni's the same way. They made the playoffs last year, but they lost. He doesn't have that experience yet. So I don't know how well I like the Eagles the most out of this division, but I don't know how well they'll do in the playoffs if they get up against a 49ers team with CMC now. They get in their rhythm, they get heated up. That 49ers offense is going to be tough with Kittle, Debo, CMC. That's a lot of people that are real tough to guard.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the Eagles defense is looking solid, and I think as long as they can maintain consistency throughout the regular season, they should translate pretty well into the going into the postseason. I think
No,
that's one.
100%.
I think that's one of the big problems is you see a lot of these younger teams or teams that are inexperienced is they have ups and downs during the season, during regular season, and then when it comes to playoff time, they just catch a bad swing. They're on a downward trend. But as long as even if they're not playing elite the whole time, but as long as they're staying above that that mark where they're playing great defense and getting turnovers and limiting possession for the other team, is what you want to see.
Right. So speaking of young teams, the top dog in the NFC East right now, the Philadelphia Eagles. They made some big moves in the offseason. This was a team that was pretty solid defensively last year. Offense struggled at times, and it was a team that I don't believe had a win against an above 500 team in the regular season last year. I believe they were 9-8, and all 9 of their wins came against teams below 500.
Wow.
So it was a team that kind of struggled last year against the big dogs. But in the offseason, give Howie Roseman credit. They had a crazy offseason. Traded for A.J. Brown, brought in James Bradbury to shore up that other safety, traded for C.J. Gardner-Johnson, drafted Jordan Davis in the first round. Like they had one of the best off seasons out of any team, and I think that's really what you're seeing here. You had a 9-8, a team that was 9-8 last year, really solidify around their quarterback, installed more of a system that fits better around his skills. You brought in a receiver that plays really well to your quarterback's skills, who's a young and up and coming star himself in AJ Brown. The Eagles' offensive line, has been good for the past 8 years.
Yeah, it really hasn't changed much.
And then defensively, they brought in Bradbury had a down year last year, but he was an All-Pro 2 years ago. He looks to be back to that form this year. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, we've talked about him already. He's a dog. He's a guy you can play in the box. You can play at slot corner. You can move him around everywhere.
I think he really embodies the Philadelphia athlete.
Definitely. He's that the Philadelphia spirit of just like pure grit. Is C.J. Gardner-Johnson.
I think someone else who's kind of gone a little bit under the radar, not really high profile, is Hassan Reddick on the Eagles. Just quietly sneaking in there with 14 total tackles, 11 of them solo. He has 4.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries.
Yeah.
It's just kind of sneaking in there. He's not really like a high profile name, and edge rushers don't get a lot of love all the time. But
I love Hassan Reddick. I don't understand why the Panthers let him go. You had a great duo with him and Brian Burns. They let him go. He's so solid. He'll get you somewhere between 8 to 12 sacks every year.
Yeah.
He's so consistent in that role. He's not going to get you that 20 sacks. He's not a premier pass rusher, but he's super athletic. He's very versatile. You can use him in coverage a little bit. He's not the typical defensive end pass rusher. He's more of that hybrid outside linebacker, can do a little bit of everything, and he still gets to the quarterback.
No, absolutely.
That gets back to the great offseason from the Jets or from the Eagles. Every weakness on their team they addressed and got so much better. And I think that's what you're seeing. Now, they haven't had a great schedule to start the year. They beat the Vikings and the Cardinals and the Cowboys, but their other wins came against the Jags, who we're seeing who the Jags are. And the Lions. Now, that was a tough first game, but first games are always strange. It always seems like either it's a complete defensive game or it's an offensive shootout for that first game of the year. It's never really some back and forth. So the Eagles have been playing great. They've held 2 teams to less than 10 points. They've only given up more than 20 points in 2 out of their 6 games this year. They had a bye week this week. I mean, they're looking like a dominant team. They're putting up 20 plus every game. So the offense is moving, defense is holding teams. This looks like the Super Bowl favorite.
Do you think they're going to be like a 17-0 team, or do you think they're going to drop a
I
couple?
I think they slip. I'm looking at this schedule. They got a stretch in the season. They have in 4 straight weeks, they have the Colts, Packers, Titans, and then Giants. I think that is a stretch where they drop a game. And then so after that stretch, they play the Bears, and then they play the Cowboys, Saints, and Giants. I think that's another stretch where they could drop a game. I feel like this is a 15-2 team.
All right.
14-3 to
Jeez.
15-2.
Yeah.
Barring any significant injuries,
yeah.
this is a
Absolutely.
15-2 team.
That's a bold statement.
They're deep at every position. They get the versatility of having a mobile quarterback who's passing the ball well this year. So as long as AJ Brown, Devontae Smith stay healthy, you got two really good receivers. The running back doesn't really matter. It's like the Ravens offense. Doesn't matter what running back you put in there, he's going to be fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and Kenneth Gainwell and Miles Sanders are both playing fucking super solid.
They're solid running backs, but neither
Yeah.
of them are elite running backs. They don't have any crazy running backs. You can see both of them going for 30 yards for the game, or both of them going for 75. They
Yeah.
take what the defense gives them, but you have to account for Jalen Hurts on the ground. And last year, I think part of it was Jalen Hurts on the ground only mattered a little bit because you didn't really have any wide receivers. You had Devontae Smith, but you didn't really have anyone else.
Yeah, it was still his first year. Like, he is still,
Right.
getting used to that. The
Right.
NFL, yeah.
And you added in a guy in his 5th year, wide receiver, AJ Brown, who has been a dog to this point. He's only gotten just around 1,000 yards every year, but he has that potential to take that next step to get to that 1,500 yards. You added in a really good wide receiver. I mean, Dallas Goedert is a very versatile tight end. He's kind of at that back end of top 10 tight ends. The offensive line is good. So when your quarterback's not getting pressured that much because your offensive line is good, you have a mobile quarterback. You can do a lot of things with that. You got good receivers. And on top of that, your defense is getting sacks, stopping the run, and you have a good secondary. I don't see them dropping that many games.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is definitely something to watch throughout the season, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I feel like the big question is going to come down to they played the Giants the last week of the season. And I think that's where one of their losses could come from, because I really could see them being 14-1 going into that game, or 15-1 going into that game, and sitting a lot of their starters.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Giants are going to hover around 9 or 10 wins at the end of the year. I think they got a tough schedule coming up here. I think that is going to be a game that it's going to kind of be like a couple years ago where the Steelers knew they were going to make the playoffs. They sat their starters. The Browns beat them because they sat their starters. You let the Browns get into the playoffs, and then the Browns made some shit happen. I think that could be the Giants this year. You got a team that's got a tough schedule to end the year, so I could see the Eagles easily sitting their starters. The Giants get that one win that really propels them into that playoff, guarantees them that playoff spot. And the Giants, that New York grit, the Daboll energy that he's bringing, they take a game from somebody. They take 2 games from somebody. I don't see that. I don't see the Giants as a team that can really go to the Super Bowl, but I think with the right matchups in the playoffs, they could steal a game or 2 from some teams that could possibly be Super Bowl contenders. But if they meet the Eagles in the playoffs, the Eagles are my favorite to come out. I just love that. I love that roster. It's so versatile in a lot of ways. And with how bad the NFC, the other divisions have been, so inconsistent. I think the Eagles are the Super Bowl favorite. I don't know how the Super Bowl favorite out of the NFC. I don't know how you boys feel about that.
No, I definitely agree. Out of the NFC, they're definitely the Super Bowl favorite, for sure. As it sits right now.
I don't know how they match up against like the Bills or the Chiefs. Some of those the teams that are in the top echelon of the AFC, because the AFC is by far better than the NFC this year. I think it could be one of those things though that the Eagles have a light enough run to the Super Bowl that they're really healthy, and when they make it to the Super Bowl, they play against a Bills team that had to beat the Chargers and the Ravens and the Chiefs to make it to the Super Bowl.
Now,
You know.
the only thing though is that might benefit the Eagles having a little bit softer side of the ball because they don't have to play those Chiefs. They don't have to
Well,
play those.
that's what I'm saying. That
Yeah.
could give them an advantage if they make it to the Super Bowl, because the 7 teams that are going to come out of the AFC, that's going to be a gauntlet.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to,
Yeah.
that's going to be a tough one. 'Cause you're
Except for
probably
maybe
gonna-
the exception of the AFC South. That might be the
Yeah.
weak side of the
But that's where I see a team like the Chargers, or if the Dolphins make it in and they're the wild card, they're able to upset the Titans, and that's just they have a tough matchup. You got a sprinter speed with Raheem Mostert at running back. You got sprinter speed with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Like, that offense is hard to guard.
No, absolutely. It's so fast.
But
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, from NFC least to NFC beast, you could say part of it's the weak schedule, but they're going out and they're winning games. They're beating the Packers and the Vikings and the teams that they weren't necessarily supposed to beat. So I got to give them credit. And at this point right now, I got to say they're going to put 3 teams into the playoff.
Yeah, woohoo! My Giants are gonna be one of those 3 teams. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean,
And then-
absolutely. Yeah.
To cap it all off, the Giants are going to make the playoffs. They're going to give Daniel Jones an egregious bag.
No.
The
No,
next
Daniel-
year,
say
they're going to
it.
get a tough
Don't say it.
schedule. And
Don't tell people the truth. Shh,
Daniel
it's a
Jones
secret.
is going to struggle.
It's a secret. Don't tell anybody about that.
But yeah, I mean, NFC least to NFC beast. I mean, what can you say? Did anyone expect this coming in? I would say no.
Oh no, definitely.
I'll
not.
be honest. I definitely didn't. I figured we'd be a two win team at this point in the season.
Yeah, we definitely expected the Eagles and probably the Cowboys to be good, but with the Giants, coming out of nowhere and storming the season early,
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I'm surprised I am surprised that the Cowboys made it this far with Cooper Rush.
Cooper Rush.
Yeah,
That boy's just a dog.
yeah, he did what he had to do.
He did
He
what he had to
plays
do.
different. He
And that
built different.
defense really turned up after week 1 to
Absolutely.
guarantee them some wins. Because
Yeah,
if that defense had continued to play the way they did week 1, this would be a 2-5 Cowboys team, not a 5-2 Cowboys team.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, boys, for stopping by. This is our NFC least to NFC beast segment.